And then, of course, the quarterback it's become such a cliche to talk about Jalen Hurts and how he's the one guy, the mystery guy. But I think that's just where we stand with Jalen. I mean,
welcome back in, everybody. Happy Wednesday to you. Thanks for hanging out with us. We are Sports Take. Derek Gunn, Barrett Brooks, Rob Ellis. Will continue the football theme as we roll into our next segment with our next guest. He does an unbelievable job as a reporter for the Philadelphia Eagles, for the Philadelphia Inquirer. You can check out his work at inquirer.com and on Twitter at Jeff_McLane. Always good talking with Jeff, and Jeff joins us. Jeff, good to see you, man. We were all blown away. We're like, man, we haven't talked to Jeff since the Friday after the first night of the draft on Thursday. That's the last time we spoke. There's been quite a few changes here in the Eagles offseason since then, man. I guess I'll start there. Were you surprised generally that they acted in such a, I would say, aggressive manner, and I mean that positively, considering there's still the uncertainty with the quarterback? Did you think they'd be as aggressive as they were?
Yeah, I guess, I thought that there would be maybe a little more of a transition period. So, I mean, I'm looking specifically at one move. You take away the A.J. Brown trade, and then it seems like that's what I expected. So I was a little surprised by that. And they very well could have ended up drafting a wide receiver if one had fallen to them at number 15. So, this was a contingency plan, and they were able to execute it, and maybe that speeds up the timeline a little bit. That being said, just knowing Howie, knowing Jeffrey Lurie, knowing how they think, it doesn't ultimately really surprise me that much, because in this town and then in this league where you can change your fortunes rather quickly, the Eagles certainly felt like they had an opportunity to make some moves this offseason that would better the team and make them very competitive. And I think they've done that.
Looking at how aggressive they were in the offseason with the defensive side of the ball, I guess they do have a lot of faith in Gannon. I didn't have that much faith, leaving last year's season, going into this offseason, but evidently they want to focus on giving him everything he needs to run this multiple defensive front that he wants, So, I mean, I thought they were very aggressive. I thought they did a great job of bringing in giving him the ability to call whatever he wants to run. How confident are you in Gannon?
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of on the fence with Jonathan. I felt like the first season wasn't great, but I also feel like he didn't have the personnel he exactly needed to run that scheme that he has. And typically it takes a little while to get the guys that you need, and they've gone out and done that, particularly Hassan Reddick and Jordan Davis. I think those are the two key guys that they added this offseason. How Howie thinks, and this goes all the way back to Andy Reid about shoring up your defensive front, your offensive front, building from there backward, and that's kind of what they did. In terms of Gannon, yeah, I mean, certainly I think there were games where I didn't really understand what he was trying to execute, but I think some of the criticism directed towards him is because of the style of the defense he plays. And I think in this town, they want to see, I hate using this word because, again, recently I spoke to him. It didn't seem like he really understood what aggressive front meant or aggressive.
Oh, that's not good. That's not good.
Well, I think he felt like, it's a cliche in that it's defense, you're going to play aggressively. Certainly they're not a penetrating front. They don't have their guys all shooting the gaps and just trying to get after the quarterback or get after the running back. I mean, that's not how they're going to play. Sometimes they're going to have their guys, they're going to allow their guys that type of freedom, but they're also going to have to play within kind of a hybrid of read and react and also just reacting. So I think some of the criticism wasn't fair because I think in this town, we've become so accustomed to playing that style that fans have become so accustomed to seeing that style, and it has been successful at times, that Jonathan didn't technically stylistically fit in with what people want here. That being said, again, going back to this to the personnel he had, I don't think it was completely fair to judge him based upon just one season.
Just stay with him for a minute, Jeff. Do you think it's going to be a hybrid scheme that they run, or you can see more 4-3, more even front, more odd front? How do you think he's going to handle with the skill set now that he has along that defensive line?
I mean, I think it's going to be a lot of what we saw last year. There's been questions or narratives that he's going odd man front. Well, he was odd. I mean, they were odd man front and base all last year anyway. I don't see how that's going to change. And when it's passing downs, you go 4-man front, and you allow your guys to rush the quarterback. I mean, that's kind of what most 3-4, and I don't even like using 3-4 anymore, because there's really more of a 5-2 front base personnel. That is essentially what I think we'll see. 5-2 with Davis as your nose guard, Fletcher and Javon Hargrave as your 4-eye techs lined up next to him. And Hassan Reddick and Josh Sweat as your starting outside linebackers. I mean, certainly there'll be other guys mixed in and out of there,
right?
But that's going to be your starting 5 up front on base personnel. Certainly as the season goes on, some of these new guys, he's got to figure out how to play their skill set. There could be some change in terms of how he runs his personnel, but to me, the bigger question is what's going to happen in the secondary. Schematically, that is really, to me, the bigger question. Is getting someone like James Bradbury going to allow him to play a little more? Obviously, he's going to always play a lot of zone, but is he going to be able to disguise better and be able to kind of utilize his skill set to not be so predictable in terms of his coverages? That, to me, is the bigger question.
Jeff, when you look at this team as a whole, and on paper, they look significantly improved, but there's so many question marks, as you just mentioned, the secondary, the safety, the quarterback obviously is a big issue. Does this team try to make you scratch your head and wonder, I can't figure out at this stage what this team is or is not?
On paper, they're better.
Yeah.
And you look at the schedule, it's not as hard as it was last year. They don't face as many top-tier quarterbacks as they did last year. So if you're asking me on paper, and you expect Jalen Hurts to maybe take a step forward, although I don't know if that's guaranteed by any stretch of the imagination, I would say that they're a good team. They have the ability to be a good team. Were they a good team last year? I mean, they went to the playoffs. They went 9-8. That schedule was really beneficial down the stretch, but they also had a very difficult schedule in the first 7 games. I think they were kind of mid-tier, maybe leaning towards being a good team. That being said, as you mentioned, the quarterback is still a serious question. We don't know how much better he's going to get. We don't know how he's going to respond to defenses seeing a year of him. We don't know. We don't know, certainly, as you mentioned, how the secondaries can perform with, Anthony Harris and Marcus Epps as your top 2 safeties. I think even of the guys that you acquired that you say, okay, these are good additions, there's still questions about him. Jordan Davis, I mean, okay, he's a first-round pick. He's phenomenally athletic and talented, but we don't know really how he's going to perform. We don't know how ready he's going to be. A.J. Brown is a very good top-tier receiver. That being said, was he worth what they gave up for him? Are there concerns about the knee? How healthy is he going to be? He's missed 7 games over the last 2 years. So to me, there's still a lot of Kaiser White, you got a great deal from him, but why weren't other teams in on him? So to me, there's still questions. I look at all the additions that they made and say, yes, these are good moves that they made on paper. But I could also, on the flip side, say, well, there are still questions about how productive they could be playing here in Philadelphia, or are they going to reach the kind of the expectations that many people have already laid out for them heading into 2022.
You muted there.
I heard all that, and I'm saying, is it the coaching that you're not confident in, or is the player themselves fitting in the system that you see that you don't have enough confidence in them, or you don't know what they're going to do yet?
That's a good question. I think there's still questions about the coaching.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought Nick did a nice job down the stretch last year. yeah, clearly we've talked about or written about so many times, just about changing, going from pass happy to more run-based offense and playing more to the skill set of your players there. Certainly, they're not going to try and do that as much this year. You got to get A.J. Brown. You expect Devontae Smith when you're older. Dallas Goedert to be your, now he's the guy at the tight end position. You still have a strong offensive line. Jalen, you expect him to take a step further in his progression. So you're going to try and do that. But again, are we going to see the same thing again this year, that Jalen just can't play to that level? Then they're going to have to revert back to being a run-based offense, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You can win that way. But long-term, does that give you the best odds for being a sustainable playoff-worthy type of team going forward? I don't know.
Hey, Jeff, how do you see the tight end position playing itself out behind Goddard?
It's a good question. Tyree Jackson is, coming off the torn ACL that he suffered in the last season, regular season game. He's been out there doing some things. He's got a knee brace on, but not really much of anything. So I'm not really sure that he'll probably start the season, the training camp on PUP, and maybe open the season, maybe still on the physically unable to perform list, which would take him out until week 7. So then you have the rookie, Calcaterra, you have Jack Stoll, you have JJ Arcega-Whiteside maybe making the transition from wide receiver to tight end. So yeah, you don't have an obvious number 2 at that position. That being said, I think that reflects the Eagles thinking that they're going to be just this heavy 11 personnel offense. And you should be. You have 3 good receivers at the top of your depth chart. And then they wanted to be that last year, and for some reason they held on to Zach Ertz longer than I think many of us expected them to hang on to them. And you saw at some point that maybe that was better for them. But if Dallas gets hurt, you're concerned. But if Dallas is fine and they run a lot of 11 personnel, I don't expect there to be any concerns there.
Jeff, what are your this is a general question, but what do you expect out of this team? Are they a mystery to you because you don't know about the quarterback? There's some changes here, some additions, usually when there's maybe not the same kind of continuity. What are your thoughts on what they are going into this season, considering the moves they made this offseason?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say that they're a little bit of a mystery because they did make not significant moves, but they did make a fair number of moves. And again, we don't know how they'll fit in. We don't know how the rookies who we're expecting all of a sudden to perform from day one, like Jordan Davis, how he'll performed. And then, of course, the quarterback it's become such a cliche to talk about Jalen Hurts and how he's the one guy, the mystery guy. But I think that's just where we stand with Jalen. I mean, last year was his first full season as a starter. He certainly, I think, showed that he has the capabilities to start in this team, start in this league for a long time. I think he has to go out there and still prove a lot. That being said, and this has been mentioned many places, and maybe the first thing that he mentioned when we spoke to him after the final game last year about 2022, this will be the first time since high school, I guess, that he's in the same offense for the second straight season. He's, we know about him going out to Southern California, working on his mechanics. We only saw 2 practices. He has some great throws. I can't really tell, just looking there with the naked eye, what kind of major changes he made in terms of his mechanics. That I think we'll learn more about when training camp and those inter squad scrimmages and the preseason comes around. That being said, it was 7-on-7. There wasn't really much competition in terms of how he performed in that regard. Look, I'm a Jalen guy. I think he can be a productive starter in this league. The question for the Eagles, and you look at his contract situation, what else could be there for next offseason, is whether you're willing to make that investment beyond just his rookie contract. And I think that's a very valid question to be asking at this point.
Hey, Jeff, when you look at this entire roster, from the holdovers to the new additions by way of free agency and the draft, give me 1 or 2 players that you will be watching real close when training camp rolls around.
Hassan Reddick. Again, I that's a good signing. I felt like for them to come out of the gate, they needed to improve their pass rush. This is a guy that's got double-digit sacks in the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
That position that last year they probably weren't, they weren't stacked. You had Jannard Avery there, and that hurt them at times. So I want to see how he performs in this scheme. It's not really, it's sort of like what he's played in before, but I want to see how he looks after getting also a big contract, and a big contract after that one beyond. I think these last few years he's signed 1-year deals.
Yeah.
This would be a long-term contract for him. So I'm interested to see how Hassan looks. I've already mentioned Jordan Davis. Will he be able to step in right away and be that kind of, that big man in the middle to free up? I mean, that position is really important in terms of what they can do schematically and how many guys they have to commit to stopping the run versus, how many you have on the back end in terms of your safety use. And then A.J. Brown. I mean, look, that was a bold move. You gave him a huge contract. You passed on certain receivers or other players that you could have taken at that spot and had them under contract for an extended, had them under a rookie contract for the first 4 or 5 years. There was a lot made of what receivers were getting this offseason and the whole kind of, okay, do you pay do you draft one of these younger guys that you have on a rookie contract? And there's some really talented guys in that draft. Or do you go and pay one of these top tier guys that have already proven themselves, but look at your salary cap, you're devoting a lot to that position. And historically, I don't know if wide receivers, if you're ranking positions, where wide receiver ranks in terms of importance of winning a championship.
Mm-hmm.
And it surprised me a little bit that Howie was willing to kind of roll the dice there, based previously upon what they've invested in that position before.
Mm.
Jeff, a lot of people think Nakobe Dean's going to be a 3-down linebacker right away. Do you sense that, or what do you think his role is going to be at least early on here with the Birds?
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that people all of a sudden just pencil him in there. He's a rookie. I know he played at a high level. He played in the SEC, but that position, there's a lot to learn. That is a difficult position to step into because you have so many responsibilities. And then also you have on top of that all these concerns about his injury history, and I think he has the labrum or whatever it is. Yeah. No, he's a pectoral.
The pec, yeah.
The pec is the concern with Nakobe. He's also a little bit on the smaller side. We saw a little bit of him during the 2 practices, the OTAs. Not a lot to really kind of make any conclusions about how he'll perform this year. So the main starters were T.J. Edwards and Kaiser White. You saw a little bit of Davion Taylor slipped in there, and Nakobe Dean jumped in there as well. But I think that's a lot to ask of him to all of a sudden make him your 3-down guy. I don't know. Am I missing something here? I mean,
it feels like a lot to me too. It feels like a bit of a jump early. I mean, he might get himself acclimated by week 8, but it feels like a lot for week 1.
Maybe. I mean, he's supremely talented. I mean, if you watched him with Georgia and what he did, he's a smart guy. I don't think understanding defense is going to be a problem for him, but just the speed and then all of a sudden seeing these things for the first time, I just don't know why you'd throw him throw him to the Wolves starting from week 1.
Well, the other thing that I know you've written a lot about this and talked a lot about this, but we haven't had the opportunity to talk. There was some movement a while back, but we've seen a lot now. Crazy turnover here, Jeff, in this front office, and Howie obviously still standing, but a lot of departures. Some names that people are familiar with, some not so much, and some people elevated from within, some not so much. Is this just, hey, they've had a successful organization, they've hired the right people taking better gigs, that's life, or there's more to it?
I think it's mostly that. You saw Ian Cunningham and Brandon Brown leave in January for assistant GM jobs. They were director level guys in personnel for the Eagles, and that was going to happen. I think the Eagles maybe were a little surprised that the Brandon one happened when it happened. I think they knew that Ian was probably primed to go. Then they lost Catherine Rach, who's young and relatively new to their organization, but it wasn't a huge surprise that Andrew Berry, who she worked under when he was here in Philadelphia, that he would take her for an assistant GM job. The Andy Weidel one to me is is the big one, because he was the vice president of player personnel. That was deemed basically the kind of the second in command, Howie Roseman's lieutenant in terms of personnel, and the fact that he pretty much took a lateral move to go to the Steelers as their assistant GM. I know there's been some said Omar Khan was named the GM to replace Kevin Colbert there, and he comes from more of the business side, and people feel that, oh, okay, Andy can head personnel there and make the picks and that sort of thing. But that's not the understanding that I get in terms of how Omar wants to run that organization. And then, of course, you have Mike Tomlin, who's been there for a long time. So don't tell me Mike Tomlin isn't going to have a say and maybe the say in terms of personnel. So to me, that was a lateral move. And, I've written about it. I think Andy was frustrated with his role and maybe how he wasn't as influential in terms of what Howie did as Joe Douglas, who was his predecessor in that role. And certainly, there were other reasons for Andy taking that position. You got to start with the Steelers organization. He's from Pittsburgh. I think maybe culturally he's a better fit there. But that allowed Howie to kind of free things up. I don't even know. Honestly, I don't even know if Andy would have been back, or if he was back, would his influence been even less than it was prior? So this allowed Howie to kind of reshift and remake the front office and to change titles. Now you have 2 assistant GMs. This would seemingly prevent those guys from being taken for other jobs, because those are football operations guys. That's Alec Halaby, who's the analytics guy, and that's John Ferrari, who's more of an administrative guy. I don't think either of those guys are going to be anyone's list to become a GM. So Howie doesn't have to worry about losing those guys. And then he brings in a bunch of new guys at director level or VP level positions and personnel, and those guys have the ability to kind of ascend into Andy's role or become an assistant GM if another team wants to come in and poach those guys like they did prior with Ian Cunningham and Brandon Brown.
Hey, Jeff, I'll take it a step farther because I've said it openly. I think some of the moves that have been made were opportunistic moves to elevate their roles, but I think there's something to some people may want to have gotten from under Howie's umbrella, so to speak, just basically had enough of dealing with the way Howie does things. I'm not trying to start any controversy, but, we know what Howie can and cannot be sometimes. And I just think some people, when and I think what made me bring it up was the fact when you said for Andy Weidel, that was somewhat of a lateral move. Yes, he's from Pittsburgh, but position-wise, it's somewhat of a lateral move. And I think there's maybe a little bit more to this than any of us know at this particular time.
Yeah, I mean, like I've reported and written a lot about Howie. I mean, he's not always the easiest guy to work with.
Right.
I think he would probably be the first to admit that. I'm not saying that he's a tyrant.
Right.
But I mean, look, he has final say, and it all kind of comes down to him. But there had been frustrations in that front office on both sides, both in football ops and personnel, in terms of how voices were heard and decisions were made.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to get that.
Yep.
I mean, I've tried to write as much about how the sausage is being made to show that. But that being said, you're right. I mean, look, there's no opportunity here beyond whatever level these guys are, for the most part, in terms of being responsible for personnel.
Mm-hmm.
Howie isn't going anywhere. Jeffrey Lurie trusts him more than anybody in that organization.
Yep.
He's recently just extended his contract to have it run concurrently with Nick Sirianni, but it's really more just that he was going to extend the contract for Howie no matter what. This keeps him here for another 3. Actually, he had 1 year left in his deal, so that adds 3 more years. So he's here through 2026, I believe. So yeah, that's what happens typically at places. You're going to leave if someone's ahead of you and you can't supplant them. Yeah, I don't want to. Yeah, like you said, it's not. I don't want to create a major controversy here,
right,
or say that there's a controversy here. This happens a lot of places. That being said, we've seen some of the personnel decisions that Howie has made in prior seasons that didn't go so well. I mean, they went from Super Bowl to 4-10-11 in 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
that reflects poorly on Howie. And, you can point the fingers at whatever, at other guys below him. Certainly there were guys that made some of those bad decisions, but ultimately it's Howie who has final say, and it's ultimately Howie who makes the final decisions.
All right, Jeff, last one, man. For me, you got about 40 something days till camp. What's the move? Because before it gets crazy for you, you get a little vacation time. What do you do to kind of recharge, man, or shut it down?
Not Howie, but you.
Yeah, you.
Hopefully some golf, spend time with the kids, a lot of baseball, and then hopefully a little vacation, and then in the background, I'll be doing some stuff these next several weeks. But the NFL world pretty much shuts down, as you guys know.
Yep.
And I'm sure at some point you're going to feel like you're repeating yourselves because it's just I don't know what else could happen. I think they'll add a safety at some point.
Okay.
We saw last year Steven Nelson came right before training camp started, so there could be something to write about. The Eagles are just keeping the fingers crossed that there's nothing off the field that we have to talk about or write about.
Hey, Jeff, you have 3 boys, right?
Yes.
Okay, so are you one of those guys like? I love being home and being a full-time dad in spurts, and you get to a point, I cannot wait to get back to the football field.
I have a long vacation break typically, and I usually take it as much as I can during the summer because the season, I would devote to that. But you're right. By the end of it, I'm like, I was teasing my wife the other day. I'm like, oh, now I'm in Mr. Mom mode.
It's funny, man. Well, listen, enjoy the time. Hopefully you're right. Nothing happens. You can kind of just chill a little bit, recharge the battery, and looking forward to the season getting started. We're looking forward to talking to you a little bit later down the line, Jeff. We appreciate it, man.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it, brother.
Take care. All the best, Jeff McLane. Always good. Jeff's a really legitimate reporter in the old school sense. He will give you the kind of the dirt behind the scenes report that you don't get as much of anymore. I think he does a really good job with that. That's for sure.
He'll get under people's skins at times, but you know what? He does it the right way.
Yep. He does it. Yes, he triple checks and all that, but he's not afraid to ruffle feathers.
No,
he's not there to be a cheerleader. That is for sure. And he doesn't care about, what the thought process is of him from an organizational standpoint. I give him a lot of props for that. That's for sure. All right, let's step aside. We'll come back. Final segment of the program. We had a pitcher last night from Barrett's home city that was 1 strike away from a no-hitter. And went kablooey. So that happened. Braves keep winning. Little Richard Sherman news, which we'll get into. A Sixers assistant being interviewed for a head coaching gig, and Minka Fitzpatrick gets paid. We will do all of that when we get back. Barrett Brooks, Derek Gunn, Rob Ellis. We are Sports Take, JAKIB Sports YouTube Network.